It's for the camera. I'm trying to stand up right now, right?
You're almost done.
We got tall chairs in there, actually.
I'll get them.
I'm having a little leg pain. Cramped. It's been a rough few days. We've been moving around. I was in. We were in Bloomington, and
Illinois State,
and then Illinois Institute of Technology.
a big community event last night.
Thank you. Sorry for going to this class. I was at the Institute of Advanced Study tonight before in Princeton. You're back.
I am. All right.
Who are you, man?
I'm Sister Kathleen Desentel. I'm part of the from the 8th Day Center for Justice, and I work with the Illinois Coalition Against Torture.
Okay. So
the media people, you should not be shy. You should ask your questions.
Yeah, ask them now.
that's a little flat. You can't filter it a bit?
Yes, you can.
I'll ask you a question that was asked last night, and maybe you thought some more about it, but I thought your responses were interesting. Given your movie and your book, where is hope for us for those of us who are part of the progressive left, if you will?
Where is hope?
Oh yeah, he was going on, and I went on, and then he turned it over to.
But I don't know whether these people here heard it, and I think it would be.
Why don't you start, Peter?
Well, I would steal Jose's answer.
Yeah, I was.
I mean, there are positive trends. What we're laying out here is in some ways, a depressing story, because it's a story about American empire and the national security state. And we're talking about the wars, we're about the militarism, we're talking about the poverty, we're talking about the ways in which the American system has failed to live up to its promise. But the other side of that is that when a country fights wars, when a country impoverishes so much of its population, that also sparks resistance to that. And we have a history of resistance and a history of fighting for progress and fighting for social change. And that's happening in the United States now. It's happened throughout our history. The 1930s we highlight quite a bit, a period of tremendous radicalism in the United States. The 1960s was a period of tremendous radicalism. Arthur Schlesinger one time said that history moves in 30-year cycles. And he talked about the 1900s, the 1930s, the 1960s. And we've been waiting for that next decade to come again, the next 30 years. And it did happen in the 90s. We saw a little glimmer of it in the Occupy movement. But part of the reason why we decided to do this project is because we know there are all those people out there who are looking for answers and want to make change. We tried to give a kind of understanding of history that's going to be a weapon. We see this book as a weapon for people who want to make change. It's not a neutral book in any sense. We make clear about that. This is not a book just to impart information. What we're trying to do is give people the information, the background, the history, the ammunition they need to change the system. So that's really where we're coming into this. And there are a lot of forces out there that are very receptive to this.
Education is certainly it's a cliche, but it's certainly a good place to begin. And we are reaching out to a lot of young people. We had, between there's about 50,000, almost 50,000 in sales in a hardcover, and we're just starting. Which is good. And then the series was seen by up to 1 million people a week over, a national and Canada. And it's being talked about on social media because I have a Facebook and a Twitter page, and I hear the feedback, and the comments are brilliant. Young people and older people are writing in very astute analysis of what we're trying to say. So I feel like we have an audience. We've done some media, some national media. Not as much as we would have liked, because I think our message was, in some ways, hated. We're not the Time magazine kind of people. We're certainly the opposite of their. Our country needs reform, serious reform, and it has to start with our empire and the concept of cutting back our military, which is very foreign to many Americans in our bipartisan foreign policy. Whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it's always the same: make America stronger, stronger, stronger. We have enemies abroad. We have threats. We must build up. We must empower ourselves. We must never be number two. America is exceptional. America is God-driven. And it'll all come to a fore again tomorrow in the Super Bowl, and we're going to see a lot of military commercials and a lot of military presence on the field. We'll have the national anthem sung with soldiers standing right behind. I mean, there's a strange ultra-nationalism in our country that has possessed us since the 1990s, since the Soviet Empire fell. When our so-called rivals, and they were really not our rivals, but when they fell in 1989, 1991, the United States, instead of retreating to the peace dividend and being humble about things, took over with a loud crash and said, here we are, here reigns the sole superpower. We will act like a superpower.
That's what Colin Powell says that. He says, no matter what anybody else does, we're going to hang a shingle outside our door, superpower lives here. Yeah.
And unfortunately, we thought they were joking. We had Mr. Bush Sr., the father, 41, went into Panama within 1 month after the Berlin Wall fell, and he went into Iraq within almost a year and a couple of months. Into Kuwait, I'm sorry. And that began our incursion into the Middle East, which is a gigantic exploration, new step in American policy. By putting troops into Saudi Arabia, we really did violate our own foreign policy, and we went into the Holy Land of Islam, and we, from there have come enormous problems, not only with Iraq, but with the rest of the Middle East, including, of course, the Osama bin Laden phenomenon, which grew out of our involvement in Saudi Arabia.
And I back that up a little bit to the 1980s. I think we see a lot of this militarism and hyper-patriotism. This was a product really initially of the Reagan era. If you remember, after Vietnam really ends in 1975. This country woke up a bit for a while. People became very anti-war in this country. There was a retrenchment in the idea of America as a dominant, hegemonic, imperial force in the world after Vietnam. However, Reagan comes in there with a plan. And it's in 1980 that the neocons start talking about the Vietnam syndrome. That we've got to get rid of this Vietnam syndrome, this idea that the United States can't go invading countries at will because of what happened in Vietnam. And so Reagan wages a war against that. And we invade Grenada. And we fight a couple dozen Cuban construction workers in Grenada. And we say, it's a tremendous victory. America stands tall again. And then we get involved in El Salvador. And we get involved in Nicaragua. And then we get involved in Afghanistan. What happens in Afghanistan really, as we're saying, starts even under Carter. And then the U.S. gets more involved during the Reagan era. And what are we doing there? We're training terrorists, basically, in Pakistan to overthrow the Soviets. What did they hate about the Soviet takeover of Afghanistan? The Mujahideen, who we were supporting, hated the fact that the Soviet-backed people in Afghanistan were educating women. And girls were going to school. So we supported people who hated that, and they finally managed to overthrow that government. But this is where the roots of it, Reagan's super patriotism, be proud of America, morning again in America. And then we tied it in with the militarism. Now the one institution that's respected in the United States is the military. And that's crazy. And we saw what happened with that. We saw what happened with Petraeus and this kind of worship of these kinds of people.
And we saw what happened in Germany in the 1930s. When you go off into a military adoration of this nature, you're bringing the whole country to a crisis point. And we feel, that there's this red state, blue state, there's this division, and this polarity that has been militarized and extremized. And we see it in the media, too. The media has played up the sensationalism of the division. So the progressive movement has been very quiet. We have wonderful people out there. They're just doing these things on a daily basis. But they're doing it against a great deal of corporate money and a great deal of military power. So it's a classic Christians versus the Romans scenario here. And you're all going to go to the lion biz, and you're going to be fed to the lions. You two sisters first. Now, there's so many wonderful people here I've run into in the course of my travel. You're laughing?
Yes, I am.
The folks here who we're working with, the Coalition Against Torture and the Puerto Rican Community center and the cultural center and the kind of great community events that there will be here, really represent the good America. This is not the people who want to go out there and take over other countries. This is not the people who want to enforce the Pax Americana on the world. These are not the people who are behind 800 to 1,000 American bases around the world. A world in which the richest 300 people have more wealth than the poorest 3 billion. These are not those people. That's a different segment of the country. It's a military segment. It's a Wall Street segment. It's a big corporation segment. That's not the American people. That's what we're trying to rally around this project.
Hi, Gisela Orozco with OI Newspaper. And what do you think that this book and this research can have the impact going south in Latin America, also to those people that is pursuing still the American dream? So what's the impact of this book with that
Well,
idea?
I think the economy did a lot to stop the people who thought about the American dream. What happened was, for a long period of time, every new constitution that was formed was modeled on the U.S. Constitution. For the last 15 years or so, there hasn't been a single new constitution modeled on the U.S. Constitution. People don't look to the American system as a model of democracy anymore. They look at it as a system where big money rules, where you've got this crazy, you can trace it back to the early Constitution, where the people actually had power in one half of one branch of the three branches